As I said, we'll cover it in two parts. We'll talk a little bit of the product and then move to the demo. So let's talk a little bit about the overview. SwiftEASe has been built with a key focus, which we thought was lacking with some of the other tools in the marketplace, with ease of use. I think what has happened in the marketplace is because the programs are large, the number of people are large, the number of work items are large, everything has become kind of exploded when you look at an interface transaction screen. What we tried to do was to figure out how to make something which is fairly light, intuitive, and teams can actually jumpstart on the tool without too much of a difficulty. It's obviously based on the Scale Agile body of knowledge, and the three pillars that we believe would be the key value differentiators for us are visual management, lean execution, lightweight, and ease of use. We have leveraged a significant part of our experience. We are one of the leaders in flow and pull-based execution systems. We have a tool called Swift Kanban for the last 8 years. It's a very established tool in the marketplace. So we are extremely well experienced in lean execution, understanding how to make flow pull-based systems work, how to work with in a continuous improvement manner, how to be able to initiate triggers for Kaizen within a team. So that all capability is bundled into the tool of SwiftEASe. I've talked about visual management. You will see that all through the demonstration, we have tried to move away from complex forms or lists or very, very crowded screens. We have tried to keep it as visual as possible so that it doesn't become a nightmare for teams to be able to use it. So one of the simple examples of visual management is an example like this. You will see this when we actually move to the demo. What you see here is an example of what we call as a portfolio view and an example of what we call as a value stream view. You can have multiple swim lanes. So there is a theme view, there's a portfolio level view. So you can have multiple swim lanes as part of any work board, and as work progresses from left to right, obviously value gets created to that work item. The tool comes with multiple zoom levels to be able to give you great levels of detail. So what you see here in this example is a highly condensed high-level zoom view, but you can actually go down to a detailed view and be able to see far more detailed view. So for example, what you see here is an example of that, where you can actually see things in a way more detail with attributes and maybe many more things.
Sure.
All the work happens in SwiftEASe. The execution, the core execution, happens on what we call as workboards. Workboards conceptually work and behave like Kanban boards, if you're familiar with them, but we have called them as workboards to be more generically applicable across teams which are using multiple other ways, whether it is Scrum or Kanban or any other way. It allows teams to be able to collaborate in front of the boards when you're doing stand-ups and stuff like that. The tool is completely touchscreen driven and sensitive. So we have customers who are using touchscreen panels who would actually collaborate in front of the board as part of their stand-ups, and then move cards and discuss in terms of where the blocks are and what is an impediment to them at that point of time. Each of the work boards corresponds to a particular level of safe, and what this means is that you could actually build a hierarchy of boards. You can build a top level board, which is a portfolio board, and build a solution level board under the portfolio board, and then build a program level board under that capability board, and then team level board under that program board. So you can have a full safe configuration that way done, or you could just have an essential safe configuration where your top level board is just a program level board, and you are building more team level boards under your program level board. So the SwiftEASe is extremely configurable to be able to allow you to actually take a safe level that you are a safe configuration that you're comfortable with. You can build fairly complex value streams. It doesn't need to be only linear value streams. You can actually do a playback. You can actually look back and see how work happened in your execution boards as work was getting executed, to understand where bottlenecks and constraints are, and we'll show some examples of that. I talked about multiple zoom levels, so that you can actually see, either focus on a particular card and drill down to a card, or you can actually take a high level zoom and see the entire big picture of the whole board execution that you have. On your work items, you can flag different things, and as I said, these boards are touchscreen friendly, and therefore we have experience of people actually collaborating in front of these visual boards on a large touchscreen panel. So the first step to actually create in SwiftEASe is to create a safe instance, and we associate a safe instance to a top level board. So once you create something as a top level board, that becomes the first board in that hierarchy. All other boards which are part of that safe instance would essentially have some other board as a parent level board. What this allows us to do is that you can have an organization where you are running multiple safe instances, and they could have each of these safe instances would have different teams, different arts. They could have different cadence, different completely different attributes of the safe instance. So each safe instance will have a top level board, and depending upon which is the level of board that you have chosen, you can actually go ahead and inherit. You can inherit a safe 4.5 template, or even a safe 4.0 template. What it lets you do is to quickly jump start with the value stream that is based on the recommended value stream from the safe body of knowledge. The other important thing is, on the safe instance, which is at the top level board, you define all the common business objects that safe has. So whether it is art, PI, sprint definition, dependency board, all your common metrics, art related metrics. So even if you are having let's say a top level board, which is a portfolio level board, all these common business objects that have relevance for all the boards within that safe instance, these are all defined and executed at the top level board. They're also available for view at the child level boards, but they're essentially available for edit and modification at the top level board. Here's an example of a dependency board. Again, it's something that we're pretty proud of. It's extremely versatile. You are not limited to just doing dependencies between one art, but you can actually have dependencies which go across multiple arts. You can go ahead and, as you can see, that it will help you identify where your potential conflicts are, and you can pretty much configure this the way you like it in terms of, and we'll talk about it when we actually get into the demo also.
Yeah, visualizing that is definitely very impactful. That's one of the things that we'll be doing in the next couple of months, is launching additional agile release trains that will have dependencies upon each other. So that's a problem that we want to be ready for when that starts to happen.
Right. And one of the observations that we saw is that most of the other tools don't allow dependencies to be across an art.
Right.
And we thought that that is not a reasonable limitation to have it. So we have built. Now, one thing that you have, what you do see here is that a dependency board, which is at the story level. We were very tempted to keep it at, let's say, a feature level, but what we realize is that because once you do it at a feature level, you are, and let's say the feature is only assigned to the PI, you're not able to get a sense of when in your 10-week timeline is the dependency really happening. So what we thought, take it to the actual work item which is under the feature, which is, let's say, the story in our example, and so that we can then refine it to a real sprint level and see where my dependencies are. And we do indicate which is the feature that is getting impacted because of the story level dependency. So we think that we have a dependency board which is way more granular and execution oriented than just having a feature and not knowing if the feature has 10 stories, which really story within the feature is part of the dependency. Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
So the other thing that we allow you to do is we allow you to create any number of card types. We allow you to build hierarchies as they are applicable in your context. Out of the box, we do come up with all the card types that are recommended by SAFE, but it's not hard driven. So if you want to call it differently or treat them differently, you definitely can do that.
Sure.
The nice thing is that the progress on the parent level cards are automatically updated based on what is the progress on the child cards. So you therefore get a real-time accurate definition of or an accurate picture of what your percent progress is based on what is the percent progress of your child cards, and that's your definition of done. You can go ahead and define teams. Nothing very fancy here, but essentially a bunch of people in a team. And then once you define teams, you can take a group of teams and associate them into arts. One interesting thing that we have done is that we have defined teams at the enterprise level, not at the SAFE instance level. The reason we did that is because we realized that there would be instances of shared services teams, let's say people from your database team, infrastructure team, who might be shared across multiple SAFE instances itself. And therefore, we have let teams be defined at the enterprise level, but we have let the arts be defined at and within the scope of the SAFE instance.
Yeah, so you can effectively have a view of your on-art and off-art teams and shared resources. That's interesting. Yeah, that's definitely something that we've been thinking about, how to get better visibility on that. So that's interesting to hear.
Sure.
Cool.
We allow you to define all your PIs. And our hope is that we are fully feature rich, so that you can actually do your complete PI planning process on SwiftEASe. So you would define your PI. You would go ahead and define. You will be able to pull the features from the backlog into the PI. As the PI happens during the PI planning process, you can go ahead and define the sprints. So you can see here an example of sprints definition that is happening. And as is expected, teams would create their first iteration of stories. So you would define your stories for that feature. You would plan them across the sprints, whether it is sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3, sprint 4. And then at the end of the 2-day planning process, you could come ahead and define your business value. Let your business guys actually identify what is the planned value that they see.
So essentially, this tool, beyond just our visibility of where what our backlog looks like, what our portfolio looks like, or where the state of the work that we're trying to accomplish is that it's also used. I mean, it looks like you have everything in here to go through a normal PI planning experience as well.
Exactly.
Neat.
So you can do business value tracking. You can do a complete risk tracking also that have been identified during that PI planning cycle.
Cool.
Okay. One of our roadmap items a little later down the line, we do intend to put an owner attribute here in case it is in an owned state, so that you exactly know who's owning up that risk. So that's a feedback that we've got, and we plan to put that in the roadmap. I did talk about the PI view. What you do see here is that whether it is a PI or a sprint, you can define your capacity, and as you allocate cards to that release or the to the PI or the sprint, you will see this capacity keep getting updated. And similarly, as the cards keep getting done, you will see this person progress getting updated. So this becomes an area for you to get a good picture of what's happening in your PI and sprint. So having talked about visual management, like hopefully what you saw here is that we have built everything using a fairly visual, trying very consciously hard to stay away from forms and lists and that paradigm. What I want to move to is the fact that we do have a fair amount of focus on lean execution. So we do a lot of things that are required to be able to go ahead and actually do your retrospectives, figure out where your constraints and bottlenecks are, and then take it from there. I'll talk about this a little more when we get to the product demonstration. These are some of the dashboards that you can do. This is an example of a dashboard that you see, which is at an art level. You can see a dashboard which is at the PI level, and we are also building a dashboard right now which is at a sprint level. So once again, when I get into the product demo, we'll be able to show you the visuals that take you through that cycle. The entire execution board and its capability is completely enabled for a mobile interaction. So here's an example of the workboard that you see with all its lanes, and here's on the right side of it you see an example of an actual work item, and you can actually put your comments, you can do your attachments, you can move your card across the lanes. So if you need to do the actual execution for 95% of your population, you can actually use the mobile interface to do that. So we'll move on to the product demo. I'll just quickly explain to you how the product demo data has been set up so that it gives you context. We have built, we are doing a safe instance for an e-commerce website development. It's a full safe configuration that we have modeled. We have planned for multiple boards. So the top level board is a portfolio board. We have one solution and one program board, and we have multiple team level boards, of which one of the teams is actually doing Kanban and the other two teams are doing Scrum. So we have the capability where teams could do Kanban or Scrum and any combination thereof, so that you're able to use SwiftEASe along with that. So with that, and we have a fair amount of distribution of work that I'll also talk about. So let me move to the actual tool side right now.
As a real quick check-in, any questions from you, Rami or Dave, so far of what you've seen?
We probably are going to just have questions around like what the data is in the dashboards, how it gets computed, like where that gets gathered. Probably have some questions about like how, like everything seems pretty straightforward right now. Kind of go to the next level, like how does this data interact with our TFS system? Those type of questions. Dave will actually have much better ones than me.
Pillars: lean execution, visual management.
So what you see here, so let me get into the product demonstration. We actually start with a fairly visual interface to be able to create your workboard. It's done in 5 easy steps. You can actually just go ahead and give it a name, give it a description that works for you, and then associate it to one of the safe levels. So I'm just going to take an example and set it to portfolio level boards. When you select a portfolio level board, it goes ahead and gives you the templates which are available in the system. The nice thing is you can define more templates, additional templates that work for you, and save them as template, so that going forward in the future you can refer to that template and not to these out of the box templates. So you can select your template, and once you go ahead and select the template, you essentially need to go ahead and associate it to one of the top level or one of the other boards, so that you build the hierarchy. Since I created this as a portfolio level board, what you see here is that this is set as a top level board. That's it. As soon as you are done, you would essentially go ahead and see a board that looks like this. This is an example of a template level board for us. What you see here is our two swim lanes, one which is the portfolio level view. This we call as the portfolio view, where you're tracking your themes, and this is the actual value stream for the epics. Now you can actually go to any card and build your complete hierarchy and do the scope decomposition. So like you see here, we have an example of let's shift this around so that you get a full view.
Yeah, so these are all the epics that make up the theme currently, all the way down to the user story.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get it. That makes sense. And that's all pulling from your work management system, right?
Yes. And the nice thing is that you can actually go to any of these and see a % progress of the cards which are under this. Okay, so what you see here is that this one has one epic. Let's say I'll go to another example where this one, where there are two epics, and you can see the % progress on the individual card when you look at this board. In case you have a hierarchy of boards, which is our data scenario, it will also show you in which board that particular card is at that point of time. So you can actually go to that board and then see what's going on if you really want to drill down and focus on it.
Sure.
Okay. So this is what we call as a portfolio view. It's been a very successful idea for us, because it really helps people get a picture of what's happening where. To give you a feel, this is our own roadmap board. If you can see this is our roadmap board and all the themes which are in the roadmap board. And what you see here is an example of all the themes that the team is working on, and where they are in terms of their % completion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So once you have defined your board, and based on the board you have got your value stream definition done, the next step, especially if you're following the implementation roadmap that SAFE has, would be to define your teams and art. So as I said, you can just go ahead and define your teams in a very visual manner. So this is the team definition screen. You can just select a bunch of people and just associate them to the team. And once the teams are defined, you can go ahead and define your art. So you can go to your arts. We have two arts. One is called the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference. And you can go ahead and just, in a similar fashion, just select a bunch of teams and associate them to the art. Okay. Cool. So what we have done so far is the board. For the board, we have the value stream. We have all the card types which come out of the box inherited, and then we have gone ahead and defined your team and the arts. Once that process is completed, to get started, you would go to the PI definition, and that's an example of the PI definition. So you can add a new PI at any point of time, just this way. Let me just not do that right now. I'll go to the PI again. So what you see here is that a PI where you see currently what is in the PI scope. So you see a bunch of cards which are in the to-do, one bunch of cards which are in doing, and bunch of cards which are in done lane, basically because this PI started on 18th September and it finishes on 26th of November. Okay, if you are doing the first time PI planning, obviously these lanes would be blank, and what you would essentially see is a bunch of cards which are in your backlog which says not in PI, right? So you can take a bunch of cards which are not in the PI and essentially just drag drop them into the PI scope in this fashion. That's all it is. Sure. So you go ahead and drag drop the cards into the PI scope, and as you as you do that, the capacity will keep getting reflected. So what you see here is the capacity which has been exceeded a bit, and therefore it shows in a red color. Once the PI is defined and the features have been allocated to the teams, you can then go ahead and define your sprints. Again, a very similar visual experience. You can pretty much, for example, see. So this sprint is completed, which is why you see most of the cars in the sprint are actually sitting in the done lane, and they're sitting in the done lane with a couple of them which were not be able to complete.
And this is just a view for one team in the sprint, right? Or,
yes, so you can actually, so this.
Oh yeah, you can choose the teams right there, got it.
And you can actually drill down to a particular team that you have. Okay,
cool.
Or you can actually go ahead and look at it for a completely different art altogether. So either way, it works so that you can take it at an art level, you can take it to a team level. So once you've defined the PI and the sprint, and you go through the PI planning process. At that point of time, you will go ahead and as the teams are working through their PI planning cycle, they would go ahead and define their dependency board. So you're defining your stories, and corresponding to the stories, you would go ahead and define your PI planning board. So what you see here is a bunch of dependencies that are there. So if you see here, there is some of these dependencies are highlighted in green, some of them are highlighted in red. The red visual indicates to you a scenario where the dependent card is scheduled later than the actual successor card. And so therefore, it's a clear indicator for you to try and resolve that conflict.
And that's where your idea of being able to link dependencies, that's where your idea of being able to link dependencies at the user story level might be super helpful, because you can actually drill down to, like, maybe it's not the entire feature that a team is dependent upon. Yeah, I get that. Okay. I guess I'm just talking out loud.
Right.
Sorry.
It would no, not at all. I mean, in my experience, it would hardly be the case that the entire feature is dependent on something. It could be, but it's hardly. Generally, it would be some aspect of the feature which is really stuck, and where your dependency really is. So moving forward, you can focus on a specific connector. You can look at all the what we call as a subnet, the sequence of cards which are part of this dependency subnet, so to say. Okay, and what you see here is I can actually go ahead and create a sequential view also for this. See, one of the feedback that we got is that often it becomes very difficult to get a full picture of, because things are scattered across, going up and down in these threads. It becomes very difficult to understand where really your critical path is. So this kind of gives you a little bit of it's perhaps a misnomer to use the term critical path, but it helps you understand from a sequential timeline perspective where really your problem is, so that you can figure out that, okay, my problem here is between my PI2 in sprint 3 and between my PI2 sprint 2.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. So that's where you focus on your dependency board. So now, coming back to the PI planning process, one of the last things that you need to do is to be able to update your business value and your risks. So you can go ahead and pretty much click on business value to be able to update all the objectives or the stretch objectives and what the planned business value is. And of course, at the end of the PI, when you're doing the system demo, the business people are expected to come and update what the actual values are. And you would define your risks also, whatever has been identified by each of the teams. So if for example, this is a team level activity, so as soon as you select a team, you can start entering your risks.
Is there any way to track like the status of the objectives? Like that's one thing that we're trying to do, is make our business owners clearly aware of when an objective has been met and get them to kind of sign off on it. Is that a paradigm supported in here?
Good question. So it's not directly related. The reason it is not directly related, because from our understanding and experience, the business objectives are not always a one-to-one with a feature or a story definition.
Totally. Yeah.
It often is kind of a many-to-many relationship between these, and therefore it's hard to correlate the person progress. One way could be to have again another interaction where you associate which all stories are part of this objective and try and track that. And if you get the feedback that that is important, we could definitely look at that in our roadmap.
Sure.
Okay, so that pretty much completes the PI planning process. And then once the PI planning process gets done, your work starts getting executed, and work starts getting executed on one of the team boards. So I'll just open one of the team boards, and this is where my work is happening right now. And just to get a sense, this is all the cards which are in the current team board, Eastern Conference team board that is happening here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are a lot of capabilities that the system allows you as far as these work boards are concerned. By the way, how much time do I have left?
We have like 20 minutes.
I have another, yeah, sure. So I've got at least another 10 minutes solid. So there is because I do want to, since this is the pulse of where the execution is happening and 90-95% of the team would be working on these boards, I want to spend a little time on this. Now, if you're working with TFS, you could essentially be working in a manner where the teams are working on TFS and you use the rest of the capability of SwiftEASe, in which case you would kind of lose on this power. But another way to integrate could be where you do the scope definition or the card definition in TFS, and you just bring that data here, but the actual execution of the team's work happens here. So you could do both of the scenarios. It is completely, again, a customer's team's choice in terms of how they want to do it. So let me take a little bit of some of the examples. One of the most powerful capabilities is what we call as a playback. So, for example, what you see here is an example of a last 1 month pattern of how work has happened in my work execution board. So you can see which of my lanes are value stream lanes are actually becoming a constraint and bottlenecks. You can actually see the constrained resources. You can see the cumulative flow diagram that is getting built along with this to kind of understand which part of the value stream work is flowing, but which part of the value stream work is getting batched up. Okay, so it's an extremely powerful way to see your what's happening in your actual team execution that you can now take back for a retrospectives to understand. Okay, so in my case, I would ask a question to Priyank: what's happening? Why were you sitting with 34 cards at one point of time? And on the other side, you might find some resources who are almost idle and not doing much at all. So it's a very very popular way within our customer base to be able to actually look at what happened and use this for the actual continuous improvement cycle. Okay. One of the other things that I want to you to look at, the boards are, like I said, extremely powerful from a visual point of view. You can define your policies, and you can see the policies that are applicable for that value stream stage. This is our own development board that we're taking as an example. This is the highest level zoom where you can go ahead and see many of the attributes. I can quickly go to the next level of the zoom and bring it down where you don't see any of the attributes. I'll switch off this one capability so that it looks a little more a little less loaded in case you're more comfortable with that. And this finally is the full picture view where you can see actually how your cards are. Now this visual on the spot, it tells you that, okay, my teams are fairly heavily start doing user stories, and then there's some mix of customer defects, which are my blue cards, or sorry, enhancements, and some tasks, etc., which are out here, and there are some customer defects out here. So it gives you a very good a sense of what the team is working on. You can actually drill down to get what we call as a calendar view. So while you're working on the PI and the sprint, you can actually go ahead and see that which are the how. If I want to look at this release or this sprint, this PI, where are all the cards spread out within the entire value stream? So I'll just zoom across.
Got it. Yep.
Okay, and now you can get a sense that okay, for this PI which is supposed to finish on 14th of October, there is no way that these cards which are sitting in the backlog are ever going to get done.
Right.
Okay. We have what's called as an activity view, so that you can actually, let's say, figure out that which are the cards which are actually aging in your value stream. So sticking to the core principles of flow and pushing for flow-based execution, you can try and understand which are the cards which are actually inactive for the last 10 days and do some more analysis in terms of why they're inactive, why they're aging, and why people are not working on them. Okay, we have talked about playback. There's one more interesting capability that we have again for flow and pull based systems, which is to actually have thresholds for cycle time. So we let you define thresholds for cycle time so that you have a watch on how much the card is aging on a particular column of your value stream, and once it starts crossing the thresholds, you can try and focus on that. Okay, why is it aging, and what do I need to do to make sure that people are focusing on it, swarming on it, so that this card gets picked up first and taken for completion. So there are a whole bunch of capabilities around the board execution, your work board execution, where 90 to 95% of your teams would actually be working on. Obviously, we are very proud of it because it lets you do a fair amount of continuous improvement and Kaizen assessments when you actually work in this pattern. So once your work is happening, I guess everything, as they say, the fun of it is always in the dashboards. So I will quickly move on to the dashboards. You can actually see a whole bunch of lean analytics. Where is my instance? Yeah, here it is. So you can go ahead and see all your lean analytics, like cumulative flow diagram, flow efficiency, throughput, cycle time, stuff like that. It's pretty, our cumulative flow diagram is pretty sophisticated to be able to show you not just the cumulative flow at this point of time, but also to actually show you what your current throughput is and when this current backlog will finish at the given rate. So it's, and if you actually want to change the date, let's say you want to say that instead of 5th April, finish it by let's say 31st of December, then what the throughput could be, we are able to actually project that and show to you. So there's a whole bunch of analytics around lean execution, and just to give you a little bit of a better data, I will actually use this as an example to kind of see how real life the data would look like.
So Rami,
so
really,
see,
is there a specific report or analytics that you guys would like to track that makes sense for you guys?
Yeah, I'm trying to. We have a number of different things we're trying to work on. Our overall safe health, about what our flow is, how much what our team's work in process is, so that we can help them understand. We have plenty of conversations with our teams that decide to work on too many user stories at a time. But if we if we can do a better job of explaining that to them with a dashboard that they can see, real time, that I think that's our next step. There's also a fair number of metrics that Dave that's on here is working to deliver as well, but that's more about the results of our overall safe adoption.
Gotcha. So
I'd say one of the things that would be really important to us is having the dashboard is great. It's the ability to kind of put thresholds on what's acceptable and have that show up in the dashboard when we're outside those boundaries.
Right.
To what Rami said, if a team's got too much work in progress, we want a big red flashing sign, or maybe something a little less, maybe a little more subtle than that, but just to kind of clue them in and help them understand why they're outside the boundaries.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so really, we got about 10 minutes just to kind of be respectful of the time here. I did have a couple questions for you. One of the things you mentioned at the very beginning was this integration with TFS, and I'd like to understand a little bit from you about how do you envision the integration of TFS with a tool like SwiftEASe? Sudhi did mention a couple scenarios where work is being done at TFS and it's kind of rolling up more towards a portfolio view, or the idea of creating some of those work items within TFS and using SwiftEASe as the tool of choice. So how do you guys envision this? Because I know I want to be understanding of what you see that integration look like.
Dave, do you want to take that one, or do you want? Go ahead.
I can start, and then if there's anything else, maybe
sure.
Throw in. So we actually use more than TFS right now. I mean, even though we spoke primarily about TFS, but we have teams that will be using Jira, and we also have teams that are using team services, which I know is kind of cloud-based TFS. And we're also doing some work in Salesforce. Like that's where a lot of our portfolio stuff seems to be living these days. So I would say my dream state is to get into one system. But the reality is we're not going to get an organization this large and distributed into one tool only. So I think that's where the integration thing comes in. We want to understand what the integration points are so that maybe we can figure out what should be in this tool or another tool versus what should be living in the systems. I don't think I have any particular preference on that. You know what I mean? I think it's probably at the team level. I shouldn't say team level. It's user story and bug level is probably what drives us to like Jira and TFS the most, if you know what I mean. I think that moving the kind of feature epic portfolio backlog level out is would be amenable to people. It would start to make a lot of sense in the ways we're changing how we work.
Right. So one thing to definitely consider that we have as our integration tool is a product called SwiftSync, and it's a hub, if you imagine, where work items can be mapped in the flow of those things between not just one but even several instances of different services. So it doesn't have to be one-to-one. It doesn't have to be just Jira to SwiftEASe. We could do Jira, TFS, versus any other products that will sync all into that product. So you could have it into one board or multiple boards within SwiftEASe. So there's no limitation for you. So if, as we go through this, if you're looking, hey, maybe we'll start off with TFS, but or TFS and Jira, but we would really like to be able to integrate other things, we can. So we got that flexibility that we would help with building those integrations. And it's really just about mapping fields, right? So fields within TFS or Jira that we want to bring into SwiftEASe, and at what level do we want to start executing on those things?
And we integrate with all the tools. We integrate with the TFS, Jira, as well as the team services and Salesforce.
Okay, cool. Maybe I can just add one other piece of color that will shed some light on what I just said. Like, as a developer, I'm working in Visual Studio. I've got my user story open. I'm making my code changes. I'm actually linking those things together and checking it in. So I've got like all this high level of integration with my development tools, my backlog, my source code repository that the teams really rely on. And depending on which set of tools and which platforms you're developing on, it kind of begs different tool sets across the broader organization. So we don't want to disrupt that kind of execution efficiency and tracking that the teams use. That being said, if SwiftEASe actually integrated in a way where I was like, hey, there is a Visual Studio plugin, and when they check something into GitHub, it can actually automatically give a link back to the user story or whatever other backlog item there was. Those would be good outcomes too. It's just that kind of, we don't want to be in a spot where we're having people jump from tool to tool to tool to work.
Yeah, that is possible actually. The integration, you can figure it like that. And when Sudi showed our own integration that we have done, we use Subversion and we have integrated, just like what you said. We pull in the check-in comments, we pull in the repository against which the code was changed, all this information into the card itself, without the engineer having to do anything with it.
So that definitely.
Yeah, because this is more of a tool that we would be utilizing, with our product management team, our RTEs, our Scrum Masters. Again, just like what you guys were showing us, trying to create flow, like managing our work in process, getting visual understanding of where we are. Like Dave's spot on. We don't want to change the way our teams are actually executing on the work that they're building.
And that definitely is one of the business outcomes of a tool like the SwiftEASe and SwiftSync, is that you're not having to manage all these different repositories of work and filling it all in. The SwiftSync product would allow that, just simply mapping those things so you can visualize that work that's happening and not have to work in another independent product in order to get that information. So the sync it can be one way or both ways, right? And so if something is happening, for example, in TFS, and your work is flowing through a process there, we can visualize that and have it synced into SwiftEASe so that you have the visualization from a reporting, from a management, from the ability just to see what's happening in those processes.
Yeah, and I really like the idea of being able to utilize this during our PI planning sessions, as well as we launch more agile release trains. We have to become more efficient with those, with those ceremonies, and capturing the data real time during those ceremonies would definitely add some efficiency to what we're doing right now.
So one use case that I can envisage is that where the stories are defined in SwiftEASe as part of the PI planning process, and they're allocated to the team boards. And at that stage, once it is allocated to the team board, it then goes to a TFS or Jira where the work is happening. But then, depending on some status updates that are getting updated on the Jira or the TFS side, we kind of keep updating on the team board in terms of where in the value stream from which lane to which lane it is moving. The nice thing is, if you can do that, and if that works for you, is that then you can do this kind of retrospective at the board, at the work execution board level, to understand your bottlenecks and constraints.
And I probably should know this, but is this a fully cloud-based application, or is there an on-premise version?
It can be either one.
Both.
Okay.
Okay. Mark, you want some other questions?
We got a few more minutes left here. Is there anything that's come up, Rami or David, since we've gone through this demo? Have we been able to touch upon the questions that you had as far as the TFS integration or other product integrations with us? Have we been able to show you the things that you need to see as far as is this the tool that's going to be right for you? If you can see, envision using something like this, please let us know if there's anything that we need to show here.
And Sudi, you should probably finish this screen, because this is the important screen that brings it all together.
So I think essentially what you are seeing here is what we call as, this is the PI level summary page. What I had here is an art level summary page. So what we are trying to do is to, in the top left hand corner widget, try to give you a sense of how your teams are distributed, and you can actually drill down to specific cities and see how your teams are distributed. If they're working in a global fashion, that's a common pattern that we see across safe instances. You're seeing a couple of performance benchmark metrics. And what you see below is a scope versus timeline view. So if I just roll down, you can actually pan across your PIs to see which epics have been worked upon in which PI and across how many sprints. So the scope versus timeline view that we are getting, we can move from an art level view to, by the way, you can actually see this for any specific team. So I can just drill down to a specific team and get a team level view. But you can now go ahead and see a PI level view. So what you see here is in the PI level view are all the team members, what roles they are playing, and who are the dev team members, scrum masters, stuff like that. So all the people in the team, what's the status of the features, the burn down charts. And what you see here is again a scope versus timeline view. So it shows you the timeline of that specific PI sprint wise, and then which are the features and the status of the stories within the features. So what you see is an example where we are in the middle of sprint 2 right now for PI 3, and therefore some of the cards are some of the stories are work in progress, some of the stories have been completed, and the future features have not yet started. So what we're trying to do is to give you a visual where you get a people view, a performance view, and a scope timeline view all in one consolidated page, so that you can kind of do some level of analysis to get a sense that, okay, what's happening, whether the team is working well, not working well, what's slowing down, stuff like that.
Interesting. Is your so this what do you use to store the data behind the scenes?
So this is all on MySQL. The code DB is MySQL, and we use it's a JBoss J2EE architecture for the entire product line.
Okay. And as far as like reporting, what do you have for features for kind of developing for customers developing custom reports?
So go ahead.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things we have done. One is we have reports, which are a lot of data that we actually allow in the reports, and then all of them are exportable to Excel or CSV files, and you can then use pivot charting if you want to further enhance those reports, number one. Number two, we have APIs or web service APIs that allows you to pull information and put it into your favorite reporting tool like Tableau or whatever. Okay. The third one is actually a pivot chart that we provide here, which is an extensive pivot chart. Here you can create any custom reports. It's just like Excel. So we allow you access what Suri is showing here. We allow you access to all the fields that you have and all the card types, and you can just drag and drop it here and create your own reports, and then save them and use it.
Cool. All right, that answers that. Thanks.
Okay, so that I think pretty much covers the entire product demonstration that we had in mind. Excuse me. And like Ram said, there are some of the detail things that I have not gone into right now, but you can essentially take a whole bunch of data dumps into Excel if you want to do further analysis onto.